This is Jerome Corsi, and today it's Friday. It's November 10th, 2023. Thank you for joining us here on thetruthcentral.com. We're doing podcasts every weekday. We're going to start out today with a update on Israel and Hamas. Israel is proceeding to root out Hamas. It's encircled the Gaza city now. Gaza City is the major city in the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip, as we pointed out, is a small strip of land on the Mediterranean in Israel, bordering on Egypt. Now, the situation of the Palestinians is that they are essentially, they've got a lot of tunnel networks under maybe all of Gaza. These tunnels are elaborate tunnels which allow them to store arms, munitions, keep the hostages. They make it very difficult for Israel to go into the tunnels to attack them. The tunnels are booby-trapped. And so Israel's got a number of difficult decisions to face here. And at the same time, the world calling for a ceasefire is mounting, which it always does. As soon as the Israelis begin to gain an upper hand in trying to combat against Hamas or Hezbollah in previous wars, the international community calls for Israel to stop. And they all cry that Israel is killing civilians and Israel's the aggressor. And all the protests these days, as the world has gone more neo-Marxist, see Hamas as the legitimate tenants of Palestine, which is what they call Israel. And this is an irresolvable problem in terms of us have been determined to destroy Israel, kill Jews and destroy Israel. And that has not shifted through all the negotiations. I mean, I've been watching this in detail since really the 50s, when I was just a kid in the first wars that were being fought with Nasser and Egypt. And this has been continuous, war after war after war. So many conflicts and wars and incursions that it's beginning to be difficult even to remember them all. But the problem is that they all are basically the same. Israel has a very strong military. These terrorists are terrorist organizations. They're not equipped to fight prolonged battles, and they have tactics which make it extremely difficult to root them out. There's comparisons being drawn to 2007, when the U.S. was trying to root out ISIS in Mosul. If any of you remember that, it was a similar situation where you had ISIS hold up in Mosul, a city in Iraq, and it was a very street-to-street fighting, very, very costly, deadly, and it cost the United States a lot of troops. It was a major battle. The Wall Street Journal is reporting on it today. He said Israel launched this attack in a way that was initially going to be a massive attack, and then for some reason Netanyahu paused the troops at the border. They planned it, they thought about it, they entered into it very strategically. They have surrounded the Gaza city, and they've been increasing the air attacks and the missile attacks on the Gaza, taking out strategic targets. There's another report again that Israel attacked a hospital. Whether or not that's true, we have to wait and find out. The first reports a few days ago that Israel attacked a hospital turned out to be false. It was actually a Hamas missile that landed, I believe, in the parking lot and did not attack the hospital. So what the Wall Street Journal is saying is the battle in Gaza City parallels in some way the challenge the U.S. faced in 2007 in northern Iraq, when as many as 5,000 diehards from the Islamic State, known as ISIS, made a last stand in the city of Mosul. Hundreds of thousands of civilians were trapped in the city, used as human shields by ISIS in an attempt to discourage artillery shelling and bombing. The last neighborhoods of Mosul were taken by Iraqi forces after a campaign that took almost 9 months, killed thousands of people, and displaced nearly 1 million civilians. Though costly, the victory was a turning point that eventually led to the collapse of ISIS and its self-declared caliphate. Again, we're doing a similar kind of situation, and Israel will probably end up leveling much of the Gaza Strip in terms of bombardment, and Israel seems to be agreeing to have some hours every day when it stops the fighting in order to allow civilians to get out. At the same time, a lot of the civilians are reluctant to get out. It's where they live. And of course, when their homes are destroyed, when it becomes a war zone, they end up having to abandon the city. They'll move south. Right now, there's attempts to open corridors in southern Gaza to get the civilians out. But again, these things are extremely costly and extremely difficult. I mean, in World War II, with the bombings of cities, civilians died by the thousands. Millions of civilians died in World War II. In World War II, the casualties mounted into 50, 60 or more millions of people that died. And these are tragedies. War is always a tragedy. I think I am never in favor of war if it can be avoided at all with peace. I mean, the difficulty is that human beings have been fighting more wars. If we take a look at the human history, it's more littered with wars than it is with peace. Peace turns out to be a unusual situation, actually, in human history, where there's not somewhere other on Earth where there's a war going on or a massacre. And here, the politics and the ideology have gotten to be very, very intense. Hamas has drawn millions of supporters all over the world on the issue that the Palestinians were ousted from Israel in 1948 when the State of Israel was created. Now, again, that's not entirely true. But the problem is in the Middle East, nothing's entirely true. Both sides have ideological issues, and my fundamental position on Israel has always been biblical. I felt that Harry Truman's decision in 1948 was only 2 years old. Well, and I have known, it took me at least until about 7 or 8 to really understand what was going on. But Israel, biblically, God, going back to Abraham, a lot of this goes back to Abraham, who is the father of both Islam and Christianity and Judaism. All three religions trace back to Abraham. And the covenant with God was that Israel would be the homeland for the Jews. And you go back thousands of years, the Jews are in Israel. So the idea that Israel is only for the Muslims or the indigenous Palestinians is just not true. And the problem is all these different groups claim the same territory as their original indigenous homes. And then you get on top of it the Neomarxism and which I'm writing about extensively and trying to get people to understand. That's the new book. Chris, you'll put it up. This is I'm trying to explain in this new book how you deal with cultural Maoism, which we're going through in the United States, this Neomarxism and anarchy. And we're right now in the phase where we've had so much domination of the universities by Neomarxism. We're going through a cultural revolution in which the university students are out there shaming anyone who doesn't go along with their gender identity, critical race theories and critical gender theories and queer theories and all their other theories. And the one that gets applied to Israel is the anti-colonial theory, where they view the Jews as colonialists, as if they were European Jews who came into Israel to take it away from the indigenous Palestinians. Well, this argument is not true, okay, because the Jews were there as well as the Palestinians, or the root of what is now Islam. I mean, Islam didn't come around for a long time. 2,000 years ago, there was no Islam. And that's the issue, that Islam claims that this is their indigenous home. Mecca is really the indigenous place but even in Muhammad's time, he was fighting with the Jews. The Jews did not convert to Islam. The Jews stayed with Judaism. when Muhammad proclaimed the Quran and all of the Islamic faith was born. But again, the struggle has become ideologically driven in the United States and in Western Europe, so that the marches we're seeing in the streets are marches that are driven by this ideology that supports Hamas, in large part because Hamas is an enemy of the United States. Hamas, which is funded by Iran, is dedicated to the same principles, which are, get rid of the United States and get rid of Israel. Death to Israel, death to America. That's what's chanted in the streets of Tehran. And Tehran has its uprisings of students who want to get rid of the religious rulers, and the religious rulers have an enormous amount of political power. They have the army, they have various militias behind them. The Revolutionary Guard is there, very strong within Iran, as well as exporting revolution to other countries like Syria. So it's a very complicated situation, and one in which there's no immediate solution. And what Israel is debating right now is that they go for a prolonged war where they try to really crush Hamas, including rooting out the tunnels. Are they going to really destroy the entire Gaza and then take control of it? Or are they just going to get by a few more years, damage, set back Hamas, and let Hamas get ready to come back and be stronger again and repeat this drama all over again? You've got Hezbollah in Lebanon to the north of Israel, ready to go into action. You have remnants of ISIS in Syria, and also the Revolutionary Guard in Syria from Iran, which have been launching missiles and ready again to, when you're on the Golan Heights in northern Israel, you can look down and see Damascus. So this is a very complicated and little region of the world that has been contentious for a long time, for thousands of years, and it's not settled yet, and probably I don't know if it'll ever be settled. It certainly will take a new millennia to settle this, and a new realization that we have to live together on this small planet without killing each other, without having thermonuclear wars, which this could develop into. It always has the potential of these conflicts to expand. Let's move on to the next story. I want to cover a couple stories. There's a lot of news today in reaction to this whole failure of WeWork. This shook a lot of markets because it was one of those where first they came on with WeWork was this great new company, and it had valuation of $47 million, and its young guru founder was viewed as a genius, and this was all going to be just rosy, rosy, rosy. We're going into a new world. Well, between the collapse of and his name was Adam Neumann, who was the WeWork founder, who now looks like basically a fraud. The same as Sam Brinkman-Fried and FTX, who's now convicted of all the crimes he was accused of. And FTX is a major cryptocurrency collapse that was really a Ponzi scheme. And the articles that are being written are pointing out that the amount of personal savings is near all-time lows, and credit card interest rates and credit card outstanding balances at all-time record highs. The American public has decided they're going to live now on credit for a while, and it can't last. You run out of credit, the interest payments become outrageously difficult to meet, and people begin to default. So when WeWork, which had this $47 billion valuation, is now in Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in New Jersey. And what they're saying, WeWork, is that they're going to simply abandon a lot of the leases they have on office sharing. What WeWork did is it had office locations that you could come in and you have your office in their office. Okay, oh, brilliant idea. Okay, so you don't really have to have all the brick and mortar. WeWork has the brick and mortar. You just build your company using their brick and mortar. Okay, and that idea was charming in Wall Street in the heyday of all these internet ideas that get funded, and some work. Some work brilliantly. I mean, Amazon has changed fundamentally retail shopping. Uber has fundamentally changed the taxi industry. So there have been some fundamental changes with the internet, but there's also been some colossal failures. Now, with the United States government at $33 trillion, and we've got next week another bubble in terms of whether or not we're going to keep the government going. And clearly, I think they'll just do what they will, have a kabuki dance all next week. Everybody will scream and shout and point fingers, and they will finally just pass some form or other of a continuing resolution, because neither party wants the government to shut down. There's too many things that would happen in a government shutdown, too many payments that wouldn't be made, and it could again trigger the bursting of this big bubble that we're in right now. By the way, when WeWork does collapse finally and goes through bankruptcy and abandons the amount of commercial real estate loans they've got, they are going to compound the problem that workers are not coming back to work in offices. They are staying home, and so there's a big vacancy rate in these commercial office buildings. That means when they get to be refinanced, they're going to have to be depreciated in value. The new loan probably will not cover paying off the full balance on the old loan, and therefore you're going to have commercial real estate bankruptcies, which will impact all the securitized commercial real estate issues. They do the collateralized mortgage obligations on commercial real estate just like they do on homes. Wall Street packages these together and sells the mortgages as securities. Those will collapse. Then the banks will begin to collapse, because the banks holding a lot of these loans from commercial real estate as their assets will have to mark down the failed assets of the commercial real estate, which will impact their capital ratios. So there are a lot of bubbles that we're dealing with in this economy, which was stimulated by COVID with all the money the government just gave out. And that has gone till now. What we're seeing now is even Medicaid is saying the bubble that included so many people in Medicaid during the pandemic, now Medicaid's going back to its normal rules, and many of these people won't qualify. This and what I'm going to cover next in the story on the EU leads me to think that this great bubble crash that I'm talking about is going to happen. I can't tell you exactly when, but it's going to happen. So former ECB, the European Central Bank head, Mario Draghi, was a former ECB head. He said that the EU is almost certainly going into recession. It already is in recession. And that the Eurozone itself is going to go through an agonizing death. He says the Eurozone recession is almost sure to happen. What Draghi says in this instance is going to make an impact all across Europe and in the United States. He said that either Europe acts together or becomes a deeper union capable of expressing a foreign policy and a defense policy aside from all economic policies, or I'm afraid the European Union will not survive other than being a single market. Well, Draghi has always pushed for Europe to abandon national sovereignty, essentially, and to go into a European Union-ruled government. And the European Union has built the bureaucracy now, like the United States has built the bureaucracy in Brussels and Luxembourg, and the bureaucracy rules over national policy. States like Italy, however, are going through serious economic times right now and need bailouts. And many of these European countries are being inundated with refugees, mostly Muslim refugees, who do not integrate into society. So Europe essentially is fatally flawed. So the Europe itself is fatally flawed. There's not a single interest rate that makes any sense for Germany, Greece, Italy, France, and Spain, let alone 19 countries. It takes a unanimous vote to change anything, not specifically allowed by the Maastricht Treaty. Okay, so at the outset, France was allowed to force its agricultural policy on all other nations to protect the family farm. Germany demanded no fiscal union. Each year, global trade policy falls to France when Germany nearly blew up Draghi's watch. The EU couldn't decide whether or not to let Greece sink or to bail it out. Finally, they bailed it out and imposed really harsh terms on Greece. So you have here a situation in which the way the EU is operating, where individual countries can block or force certain actions, it is trying to act as if it were a nation state, with all these nations being states to a federal union, but it hasn't accomplished that. And the rules and regulations that were crafted to get the EU to be created in the first place negate the possibility that it will be crafted, because individual countries who do not want to go along with a change because it's not in their national interest can block it, depending upon the rules of the particular action being under consideration. So what Draghi is lamenting, he's saying, I'm afraid the European Union will not survive other than being a single market. Already the EU is nothing more than a single market led by dysfunctional nannycrats. In other words, he's calling them nannycrats because they won't go along with the EU unified policy, with endless regulatory madness and too little free market capitalism. The EU fights over border policy, AI, G5, agriculture, trade, an EU army, and literally everything. One might say the same about the U.S., but it only takes a majority to change things in the U.S., not 50 of 50 or 28 and 28 in the EU. All 28 states in the EU have to agree to changes that are fundamental. In the United States, we are supposed to have fair elections done with a majority determining who's going to be president, which party's in power, which policies then get shifted. But it's not a continuous debate that drags down decision-making, and the EU is fundamentally flawed because of its internal structure. That's the point. Now, I'll wrap up this section of the podcast by saying, again, get a copy of this free book. I mean, it's free. Get a copy of it. The book is right here. You know, it's not a long read, but it will inform you of how we're going through an historic period of time of creating money. And one of the comments made in yesterday, I particularly liked. One of the commentators was saying, you know, it's really not just fiat money. We're really selling treasury bonds, largely to foreign countries and to the Federal Reserve, and that's financing our money creation. The money's being created at interest that has to be paid back. So it's really not just printing the money. Again, the Federal Reserve is in the middle, and the Treasury Department is the one who issues the currency. But again, the Federal Reserve is in a sense demanding that, you know, our money is created. We don't have, you know, are these Treasury notes? Okay, well, fine. What are they backed by? They're backed by the Treasury bonds. What are they backed by? Foreign countries' willingness to buy them. Well, today, the bond market interest rates are up to 5%. Those rates get up to 8%, and the interest payment on the U.S. national debt is going to shoot up beyond $1 trillion. These debt levels are unsustainable. So I'm saying that something is going to cause a crash. We work on top of FTX. Is the beginning. Take one more shoe to fall. You know, there's writings about this new U.S. mall that has been built out in the Meadowlands by Giant Stadium, by MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. Well, that's a big boondoggle. They can't get people to fill it. Again, it's another idea of this amusement park within a mall and on a grand scale, and it's simply too big. It's simply too enormous, and they're starting to miss debt payments. If that mall goes under, that's going to be a major impact in New Jersey. And we start seeing these kinds of failures, we're going to get a systemic crash where one thing triggers another thing, which triggers another thing. And pretty soon we are back where we were in 2008 and 2009. Now, what happens in all these times, and again, we've got also Jimmy Carter, the 1970s. We have not the Yom Kippur War, but we've got the war going on now between Hamas and Israel and Gaza. The Yom Kippur War is followed by the OPEC oil embargo, gas lines around the United States. Jimmy Carter saying, put on a cardigan, we're running out of oil. And if you go back to 1971, our national debt was minimal. It shot up to $33 trillion as we've gone through this Ponzi scheme with the dollar. The dollar is not backed by gold. So the dollar now hit $843 an ounce when Reagan took over from Carter in 1980. Then after the 2008-2009 subprime market crash, gold hit $1,426 an ounce. COVID, gold hit $2,074 an ounce. It went to its all-time high. I'll check here for a second and see what gold is priced at right now. But gold, as we're talking, has been challenging the $2,000 mark. So gold today, let me just take a quick look on the internet. Gold today is at $1,945. They depressed it since last weekend when it was over $2,000. Gold is manipulated by the central banks and by the large banks in the gold market. They want to keep gold low because as gold rises, their currencies themselves become less valuable. The currencies are determined in their worth by purchasing power. How much can you buy for $1? That's what your dollar is worth, the goods it can buy. As it buys less goods, the dollars become devalued. Purchasing power has become weakened. Gold's purchasing power persists through these currency devaluations, these currencies going, the government's going wild printing the money, and they can't meet their debt levels. So the government has the printing press, or today the money's not even printed. The Treasury just issues, the electronic blips that make the money come to be. This is a house of cards. And if you got your retirement savings in the stock market, get them out now. Call this book free, and I'm going to give you the 800 number. Get wrapped up in this, and let's put the 800 number up. Get a free copy of the book by calling Swiss America, 1-800-519-6268. I'm going to repeat that, 1-800-519-6268. Sorry about that. I forgot to put on the Do Not Disturb this morning. I will do that now. Get a copy of the free book, Talk to Swiss America. I think if you do that, you're going to find that you are having an opportunity here to get some of your currency into gold, which will hedge against what I'm talking about, these bubbles bursting. Because at some point, the gold is going to go up in value. And it could go up dramatically in value if these historical trends bear out again. I think they will. Take a look at the website. There's still this Walking Liberty $50 offer where you can get up to 250 of these coins, which have a very high silver content at basically what they're worth in gold. And I mean, you can buy them at their value in silver. And it's a one-time offer for new customers. But again, take a look. That's the silver Walking Liberty $50 offer. Fill out the form, and you can get these Walking Liberty $50. You can get a free copy of the book. This has been one of my long-term sponsors. I've been with Swiss America since 2004, and it's been an extremely reliable company. I solidly recommend it. Chris, any comments at this point? I know you'll have to switch a little bit gears here, but I usually like you to comment as we cover this first half of the show.
A lot of interesting insight here, but yes, we don't want to revert back to what happened in 2007, 2008, 2009. A lot of people don't realize, and you were talking about how credit card debt was going up, and it's been terrible over the last maybe year plus. It's a common topic here on the Truth Central. What people don't remember when they discuss the recession of 2008, 2009 is it all started with the 2007 credit crunch. That's when we can talk about what happened the years before. We can talk about the Ninja loans of the 1990s, but the fact is there was a huge credit was a huge problem, and people charging too much on their credit cards, huge, back in 2007, which started the whole thing and made things worse in 2008, 2009. So this isn't something that's going to be instant. It's going to be something that's going to build up and get worse.
Unfortunately, that's the case. And I think it's all a crash is built into the system right now. When it's going to happen is unpredictable. Some event will occur, and that event will trigger another event. That'll trigger another event, and you'll have the whole house of cards coming down. And that's in the works.
What I do want to add is if you missed the number, or you're listening to the podcast right now and you don't get the number, I'm going to give it to you again, by the way, for the book, the free book, how the coming global crash will create an historic gold rush by Dr. Corsi here and Dean Heskin. The number is 800-519-6268. That's 800-519-6268. But if you miss us giving it to you and you don't feel like rewinding the podcast a little bit, the links and the phone numbers are in the description.
Right on the homepage, right underneath the book, you'll see the phone number on thetruthcentral.com.
And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, the links are in the description down there too, and so are the phone numbers.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Next couple stories. Germany is now going to bail out a giant loss-making wind farm, and the UK isn't going to increase subsidies. So the German government, Siemens, which is a huge German industrial company, and other parties will provide billions of euros in project-related guarantees to support Siemens AG's struggling wind turbine division. The financial assistance comes just weeks after the company warned about mounting losses amid a meltdown across the wind and solar industries. Both industries are collapsing, just like we saw under Obama when he tried the same thing, that is, throw billions of dollars to try to make wind and solar work. And then we had Solyndra, with a big wind solar farm that, now all these solar panels are just junk. Solyndra failed, and nobody went to jail. The Obama money that was spent on green energy, some huge percentage of it, Peter Schweitzer proved this in the Government Accountability Project, went to the people who were on Obama's 2008 campaign fund organization. Those top people got rewarded with solar contracts. They made a lot of money, and the projects failed. Solyndra is the poster child of that debacle. So now it's happening that Siemens Energy's top holder, which is Siemens AG with a 25% stake, is prepared to provide guarantees to keep this failing division going. But nothing's been decided, and an agreement needs to be formally drawn and supported by the stockholders, which has not happened. So as a result, Siemens Energy fears it will struggle to secure guarantees from banks, has approached the government and Siemens AG, the parent company, to obtain a guarantee framework. So it's a failing project. The German state would assume liability for 80% of an initial 10 billion euro funding tranche, while banks will be liable for the remaining 20. That's what they're trying to put into place, to get another $10 billion to make these wind farms work. But Siemens Energy shares in Germany crashed more than 70% since mid-June, as it's abandoned its 2023 profit outlook after a review of its wind turbine union revealed a billion-euro problem. Okay, so at the same time, this company, Ørsted, which is the world's largest offshore wind farm developer, pulled out of these two New Jersey offshore wind farm projects due to soaring inflation costs in a high-rate environment. And this whole renewable energy meltdown is occurring in wind, and it's spread now to solar as several solar power company stocks crashed on sliding demand. So at the same time, the UK government is preparing to offer significantly higher subsidies for new offshore wind farms get the country's clean energy strategy back on track after developers shunned the previous auction because the price was too low for offshore wind to be viable. So as Denmark, Ørsted, the world's largest offshore wind builder, will decide by December whether to proceed with the UK development, and Sweden's Vattenfall AB shelved a giant project off the English coast earlier this year in response to soaring costs. So you're seeing essentially that the energy transition to renewables across the Western world is crashing and burning. The Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act was all about sustainable wind power, and it just has not worked. It's not going to work. I don't care how many billions of dollars they throw at it. You can generate some energy by wind turbines. That wind doesn't blow all the time. Sun doesn't shine all the time. You've got to store this energy in batteries, which loses energy to store it. The batteries take mining of rare minerals, which have to be done in usually third world countries and often by slave labor or children mining these rare earth minerals. It takes energy from hydrocarbon fuels often to produce the energy that goes into electric car vehicles. I'm going to cover that next. But, when the fundamental when I wrote, and this book is done extremely well, The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change. Chris, if you can show the cover of that too, please. I said in that book that this is another ideological boondoggle. The carbon dioxide is not the temperature knob of the earth. Carbon dioxide is a trace molecule in the atmosphere, about 0.04%. Water vapor is the major, 70% of all greenhouse gases are water vapor. We've had far more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere 600 million years ago. The mathematics behind wind and solar do not support the conclusion that they are going to be sufficiently powerful to transition without burning out the electric grid, because the electric grid transistors need to cool off at night when peak demand is low. If everybody's plugging in their electric vehicles at night, the whole electric grid will burn out much quicker than it was designed to burn out over 30 years. It could go by in 5 or 6 years. We're not prepared for this. And so the idea that we can just make this transition because Joe Biden decided we should, or some, Michael Mann forged the data to create the hockey stick graph saying that we had perfect temperature on Earth except for the industrial age. We started burning hydrocarbon fuels. They emitted carbon dioxide, and that's when temperature shot up. It's not true scientifically. It ignores the medieval warming period, the Little Ice Age. The Earth had magnificent, great changes. The continents have separated apart. We've had giant asteroids hit 65 million years ago that wiped out the dinosaurs. That contributed to that. That sent tsunamis all the way from the Yucatan, where the asteroid hit, all the way up to what is today North Dakota. That's been determined by archaeologists going back in and looking at the different layers of earth, of soil, in which that tsunami hit, and seeing how many plants and fish and other animals were carried north by the tsunami to where they were not indigenously living at the time. That's been scientific. That's been proven scientifically, and I think it took probably 25 years to get that established. But now I think it's firm science about that asteroid hitting. And I write about that extensively in this book, explain to you how hard it was to prove that had happened. But now that it's a fact, you got to realize the Earth is subject to cataclysmic change. The sun is the major source of light and heat on Earth, and it does not burn constantly the same. It has high periods when there's a lot of sunspots. Earth is warm. Cool spots when it's burning less sunspots. When the Earth gets farther from the sun and its elliptical orbit at the very extreme elliptical point, we have an ice age about every 100,000 1,000 years, and we'll have another one. But again, this is not a function of carbon dioxide. When the Earth gets farther from the sun, it won't matter how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere. More carbon dioxide produces more trees. It's not a linear function because there are feedback mechanisms built into how the climate works. One thing triggers another thing. So we get more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It doesn't mean we're going to get warmer. It means we'll probably have more plants. So plants absorb the carbon dioxide. And if it is warmer, that's beneficial for human beings. Cold is where you don't want to live. Cold in the ice age is not a particularly pleasant time to live through. Let's do the last story here because, again, it's on the same theme that we are seeing it's time to pull the plug on. This is written by Pete Hoekstra, who was in Congress for many years, and then under Trump, he was our ambassador to, I believe, the Netherlands and the Trump administration. He was 18 years in the House of Representatives, representing the 2nd District of Michigan. He served as the chairman and ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. Pete Hoekstra has written a piece today in the Gatestone Institute saying time to pull the plug on forced electric vehicles. And he writes, our federal and state governments are investing huge sums of money into projects that will benefit a foreign government, communist Chinese, one that might not have America's best interests in mind. The harsh reality may come in the form of an expensive inventory of built-up and unsold electric vehicles that Ford thought customers would buy, but is finding out now that customers don't want. Another red flag for the EVs is lack of profitability. For Ford and GM models, Ford lost $32,000 on every electric vehicle it sold in 2023 and expects its EV business to lose $4.5 billion on 2023. GM cut its quarterly profits by $1.5 billion due to electric vehicle losses. And Hoekstra writes, it's time for our policymakers to stop and seriously evaluate if we as a nation are prepared to make these gigantic investments in unproven technologies that risk our nation's energy and transportation leadership. Now is not the time for communist central planning. It's the same theme with the EU. The central planning doesn't work. Ideologues determining economic policy is a bad idea. Climate crazies worried about a problem that doesn't exist on science they don't understand should not be able to have Gretas around the world trying to shame everybody because we're using hydrocarbon fuels. I point out hydrocarbon fuels are not fossil fuels. They're made internally in the earth on an ongoing basis, and they're plentiful. So the recent headlines regarding this forced transition from gasoline to diesel to electric vehicles are screaming, slow down, even as the federal and state governments are barreling along trying to regulate and mandate them. So the market has shown, and the technology has shown lots of warning signs, but the governments are not ready to accept it because they don't want to accept that our national and economic security depends on hydrocarbon fuels, not a berserk environmental ideological agenda that is neo-Marxist in nature, aimed to destroy capitalism. It will do exactly what the creators of this climate change hoax knew it would do, which is destroy capitalism. That's its only ultimate effect. And it will be extremely negative and have disastrous consequences on the quality of life. But then that will not displease the depopulationists like Bill Gates, who are at the center of the climate change movement. This point was driven home. The strategy is not based on a competitive marketplace. If it were, we would stop producing electric vehicles. So the chairman of Tokyo Motors urged policymakers to hedge their bets by investing in alternatives to electric vehicles. Hybrid technology has more possibilities. But again, hydrocarbon fuels are available and they are plentiful. If we allow the companies that produce hydrocarbon fuels to do their job in a free market, we would have no energy problem. If we go down this route of forced change of these so-called sustainable energies, we'll find out that the economy is not sustainable. the economy will crash. And this is another major force behind what I see building as a giant economic crash. So we're finding the government's incentive and mandates are massive. Goldman Sachs estimates that up to $3 trillion in incentives for green energy are included in the Inflation Reduction Act. It includes wind and solar power. A significant portion of the funds are targeted towards the transportation industry. Michigan government is committing billions of dollars in subsidies, incentives, tax abatements, and infrastructure improvements for the construction of 2 battery plants. In Illinois, the government is looking for spending several $100 million on another battery plant. Unfortunately, these 3 plants have significant ties to the Chinese government. So our federal and state governments are investing huge amounts of money in projects that will benefit a foreign government, Communist China, when it may not and does not have our best interests in mind. California plans to initiate a ban on the sale of all new gas-powered automobiles by 2035. Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, and Washington have similar measures in place. These massive financial incentives and evolving government mandates and restrictions, it's no surprise that companies like GM have announced plans to only produce EVs by 2035. So the federal government in some states have made a decision the future is with electric vehicles, whether or not the market or the technology is ready for it. This is a disastrous set of policies, and it is inevitably going to end up in the buildup of inventory of cars that are not bought, Ford and GM scaling back their ambitious EV plans because they'll go out of business if they keep complying, and the suspension of construction of battery plants, which has already begun. Ford temporarily paused the planned construction of a battery plant in Marshall, Michigan, and another in Glendale, Kentucky. Okay, so if they're losing money on every EV sold, the car companies, if the governments are just pouring in massive subsidies, which will be evaporated, you're still not going to get wind, solar, and electric vehicles to work. It is an insanity we're in. I'm saying this is an age of disinformation. The disinformation about carbon dioxide is overwhelming. The hoax is astounding. And I think the only solution to it is why I'm writing this is The Truth Central. My books are The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, Climate Change, The Truth About Neomarxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy. The truth is the only thing that's the cure here. If people will apply a biblical lesson and judge all of these hoaxes by what they're producing, the fruit of the tree, what does it produce? They're going to see it's a destruction of the middle class. People will lose their homes. They're going to be not able to exhaust their credit cards and have the credit card and banks come after them with debt collectors who are not fun. And you're going to see a massive, we're supposed to eat bugs. We're supposed to eat meat that's produced, more government control, more government involvement, and taxing exceptionally high taxes on gasoline or on gas-driven vehicles, taxes for bringing them into the city. I mean, this is a government-imposed, ideologically driven policy objective that is not backed up by solid economics. It's not free market, and it doesn't work. That's the problem. And when people see that it is aimed at destroying their standard of living by the neo-Marxists and cultural Maoists who want to destroy prosperity in order to impose upon us their totalitarian idea of utopia. And if you want to know what it's going to look like, just examine how the Cultural Revolution went in China, where they destroyed thousands of years of culture, history, Confucianism, brilliant writing, art, temples, all kinds of things destroyed in the country by the Red Guard with their little red books going around as if they were the only ones who had truth on their side when they were involved in the middle of a Maoist lie that communism would bring prosperity. Communism brings death, disorder, and anarchy. And we're in that cycle again, and it's coming to America. Chris, any final comments before we wrap up?
Here's another little instance out of the electric vehicle department here. Winds up New York City has realized that electric snowplows do not work during a tough winter. They're weak. Insufficient, they say, but really weak in the demands of... have you been through a New York blizzard?
I have been through New York blizzards.
Yeah. I think we all knew electric vehicles weren't going to be able to handle that if they can't handle a lot of other jobs. So New York City is going back to diesel-fueled plows because they can actually do the job. But it's another blow to this this idea of forced electric vehicles, this agenda that electric vehicles are the future. This is terrible.
Yeah,
it's a waste of taxpayer money too.
Let's have our military be in tanks and airplanes that are driven and flown by transvestites in dresses.
In electric planes too. There we go.
Electric planes. Where are you going to plug it in?
Yeah. Maybe they'll have a charger midair.
We'll just have a big battery in it. We'll have a big battery in it. Okay, it's Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is it's Friday, November 10th, 2023. Have a good weekend, everyone. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. This nonsense will come to an end. We're in an era of a great mass delusion over this critical race theory, critical gender theory, queer theory, electric vehicles, on and on and on. The Ukraine war, non-ending war to support a country that is the most corrupt in the world, keeping it afloat so the arms dealers can make more money and have their turn at the trough, as the pharmaceuticals did during COVID. We're living in a CIA-constructed reality. We're living in a Truman Show that is dysfunctional and dystopian. And it violates God's laws. God can pull the plug on this place anytime God decides. God will have the judgment of God. We'll go through realizing that these things don't work. They not only don't work, they violate God's law. And as such, there are consequences. The remedy is in the Bible in 2 Chronicles 7:14. We should get on our knees. I'm doing it. I'm doing it for us all, and I want everyone to join us in this. Get on our knees and let's ask God's forgiveness for letting this country and this world get to this point, for killing so many babies, cutting them apart in the womb, for having God out of our lives, out of our schools, for the persecution of Christians around the world, which is massive. We're going to see the destruction of churches starting in Europe. It's already going on. This is not, as they say, sustainable. This is madness. And we're going through a period of madness. It won't last forever, I don't believe. But the risks with the weapons that exist, you could have a thermonuclear war occur out of escalating conflicts in Ukraine, escalating conflicts with Israel, escalating conflicts with Taiwan, or any number of other places that we're not even thinking about today. It's a very dangerous world there because of the insanity of these ideologically crafted themes that are crafted intentionally to destroy. The crux of neo-Marxism, attacking the culture, the family, etc., is an intentional plan that is being implemented as a mass delusion. And it's seductive because it tells people you can have sex all you want. You don't have to worry about babies. You don't have to worry about your mate. You don't like your mate, get another one. Disposable everything. We will see an end to this, and it will not be pleasant. But I do think there are enough people coming back to God that a revival is possible. And one of the things I feel encouraged by is the wave of Hispanic immigration that's coming in. Should be illegal. This is a complete mess. But these people do believe in God, and they do believe in families. And that is a hope that this light in the human spirit will not go out permanently, but that flame will continue to burn despite and throughout this crisis to be revived. I truly believe that can happen if enough people return to God. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is November 10th, 2023. We'll be back on Monday. The Truth Central. Please like the show, spread the word, and thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend. God bless.